Alrighty. I very much apologize for that. Did not have the mic properly set up, but we are here now. Welcome to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. We're going to start talking a little bit about the NFL draft. The first round obviously happened yesterday. I want to get all my reactions to that and give you guys an idea of who I think won the day, who I think lost the day. And then we'll get into a little bit of talk about the group of five. Derek Dooley has brought forth a new idea for the group of five that could kind of give them a little bit more of the spotlight in the college football world. Then we'll get into a little bit of more news around the college football playoff. There have been some new details that have been released following some meetings that happened a couple of days ago that I want to break down for you all. And then we'll finish it up with a transfer portal update for the week. There's been a ton of stuff happening over the last couple of days and want to make sure you guys are fully up to date with where everything sits. But let's start, or before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your questions on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. Huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to have a fun kind of interactive experience here, and it's better for the both of us, I think. So, again, that's gsmcpodcast.net. But let's jump right in and let's talk about the first round of the NFL draft. There was obviously a ton going on yesterday. There was a very, very active NFL draft, a couple of picks that no one expected, a couple of trades that were a little bit all over the place. But let's break this down. We'll go pick by pick and then kind of give some overall thoughts at the end of this. But let's get into the first round and let's start up top. And the first four picks went pretty much exactly how you would expect. We had Caleb Williams go number one overall. I don't think there was any question there for the past couple of months, to be totally honest with you. Jaden Daniels at 2. There was still kind of a lingering thought that it might be Drake May at this position, but I felt pretty good about Jaden Daniels going. He ends up in Washington, and I think Commanders fans are getting that same RG3 type of vibe. Hopefully it doesn't end the same way, but definitely the same type of player. At 3, you get Drake May going to the Patriots. I think it's a great pick as long as he is not the starter this upcoming year. I think as long as he gets a chance to learn behind Jacoby Brissett, which is obviously not what you want for a number 3 overall pick, but it could be better in the long run. So I think as long as he is not thrown into the fire, I think he has the ability to be a big-time player. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Arizona Cardinals. There was a little bit of talk around Malik Neighbors possibly stealing that spot. I didn't necessarily put a lot of stock into that, did not expect that to happen, and we got Marvin Harrison for Kyler Murray. So I think it makes a ton of sense, definitely something that they needed to do on that offensive side of the ball and replaces that DeAndre Hopkins void that's been there for a little bit now. But then some different things started to happen. We had the Chargers, who were linked a lot to the Vikings in terms of a trade, possibly trying to go up and get J.J. McCarthy. They decided to stay put and just take Joe Alt. They definitely needed offensive tackle help. Anytime that you can protect someone like Justin Herbert, who can be as accurate as he can be, you're going to be very successful. So I think that was a great pick for them. That did push the Titans to take J.C. Latham. Now, that is not a bad consolation prize by any means. Both very, very talented kids. I think J.C. Latham is a little bit more of a toss-up in my mind than Joe Alt, but still a very, very good player and can be a very talented player for the Titans going forward and kind of help Will Levis as his blindside blocker. Then we got some wide receivers off the board after Marvin Harrison Jr. Malik Neighbors goes to the Giants at 6. I think this is a great pick. I think this gives them a little bit of energy, a little bit of edge that the Giants have just been lacking a little bit in the past couple of years. And I think he's going to be one of those guys that is going to make mind-boggling highlight plays pretty much week in, week out, just because when the ball is in his hands, things get very dangerous very quickly for defenses. So I think he might have a chance for Offensive Rookie of the Year. As long as they put the ball in his hands consistently, this kid's going to make a lot of plays. And then the shock happened at number 8. We saw the Falcons take Michael Penix Jr. from Washington, the quarterback, and you're going to have to bear with me a little bit here. I am a Falcons fan, but all bias aside, to be totally honest, I think everyone believes this. This is just a bad pick. Outright, I don't think there's many other ways to look at it now. we could be looking back in a couple of years and Michael Penix could be, leading the Falcons very, very consistently and being an incredible quarterback for them, and this could not be as big of a deal. But as of right now, it's just a crazy decision. You just paid Kirk Cousins an insane amount of money to stick around and be your quarterback for quite some time. Michael Penix Jr. has his injury history in the past and is 24 years old, almost 25 now. Just a crazy decision by Atlanta, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, if they felt that much conviction and feel like he's going to be their guy for, the next 7 years or 6 years or whatever it is after Kirk Cousins moves on, then I suppose it works. It's just another head-scratching pick in the top 10 for the Falcons, but I've become used to that. But let's continue on here. Number 9, it did go Bears, went with Rome Odunze. I think this one is just as safe of a pick, I suppose, as you possibly could do. I think the Bears for the longest time have been in the position of, let's just get the quarterback and hope that everything works out instead of filling it with as many great things around that quarterback for him to be successful. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's might be the most sure-handed receiving core in the entire NFL at this point. You have Rome Odunze, you have Keenan Allen, who doesn't drop essentially anything. DJ Moore is a great player, and then Cole Kmet is very, very sure-handed. So it helps Caleb Williams a ton. I think Caleb Williams loved that pick, as you could see last night. So I think this is a great pick. I think it makes their offense incredibly potent. They will need a little bit of help on defense throughout the offseason, but it'll come, and that defense is only getting better throughout the time that Matt Eberflus has gotten there. But let's move on down to the Vikings. This is where we saw the first trade of the night. So a lot of people thought there would be a lot of more movement in the top 10, but it finally comes at number 10. The Vikings move up one spot. Not really sure why that was the case. Maybe there was another team threatening to move up to that spot to take JJ, but they grabbed JJ McCarthy, and I think this is the best situation for him. I think it's the best situation for any of the quarterbacks that were drafted in this first round. So I think JJ is going to be kind of thrown into the fire, like he will be the starter to out the jump, but he's going to be a really good player for them as long as he can, be put in the right situations and can put the ball on target, which is not something he's really struggled with very much in the past. The Jets get their offensive tackle help that they very much need in Olu Fashanu, definitely a guy that is very, very talented. And Aaron Rodgers, you need him to stay on the field. And getting a guy that is going to be, in my opinion, a long-term starter in the NFL always helps that. So very, very good pick by them. I think it's a very safe pick because I think between him and J.C. Latham, if I had to pick one to be more successful at the next level, I would lean Fashanu. But we'll see what happens there. And then the other quarterback went. We had 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks, and Bo Nix at 12 was the last of them. We had, I think this is a very, very interesting pick by the Broncos. I think it sounds like Sean Payton just really fell in love with this kid, and I think it could work. I think there is an ability to him where he's going to be very accurate. He's going to make a lot of the right decisions. Now the question is, are you going to put him in the really advantageous situations that Will Stein did a year ago at Oregon? Now Sean Payton can do that, but the supporting cast will not be quite as good, so it'll be interesting to see how he develops, but I think he can be a really good quarterback at the next level, especially with someone like Sean Payton in his corner. And then, in my opinion, the best prospect in this entire draft, maybe only after Marvin Harrison Jr., dropped in pick 13. I think Brock Bowers to Vegas is an absolute steal. Him and Devontae Adams is quite the duo to be throwing to. Now, who's going to be throwing to him is a question mark. I think Aiden O'Connell is probably their starter right now, but I'm not sure if that's their long-term plan there. I think they really wanted Penix. I think they were trying to trade up to possibly grab him, but never worked out for him, obviously, and they'll have to either find someone later in the draft or possibly go out and get someone that can start for them. But Aiden O'Connell had played some good quarterback in the past, so who knows? Maybe he's their guy going into next year. And then we had Tyler Fuaga go to New Orleans at 14. They absolutely needed the tackle here. There was no chance they were going anywhere else. He could be the anchor at left tackle that they really need. We already had 4 offensive tackles off the board before pick 4 or at pick 14. So just a remarkable offensive tackle class, and that really played a part in last night because it did not stop here by any means. The first defender off the board was Liati Latu, a guy out of UCLA, very, very talented edge rusher. He came off the board at 15 to the Colts. He's the best edge rusher in this class to me. I think he's the second best defender behind Byron Murphy, but at the end of the day, still a very, very talented kid, and I think he's going to have double-digit sacks as a rookie, so I would not be surprised if he was Defensive Player of the Year, to be totally honest with you. And then back-to-back defenders happened here. We had Byron Murphy go to the Seahawks. It feels like the Seahawks love that interior defensive lineman that is a little bit lower to the ground, a little bit more forceful, and Mike McDonald getting his hands on this guy is going to do wonders for this kid. So very excited for him. I think he's someone that can really transform a defensive line, not just on the interior, but from an edge rushing perspective, can free up a lot of space for those guys. Minnesota takes the first 2 trades of the day, goes from 23 back up to 17, to take Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Bama, a guy that fell a little bit further than I think he was expecting, but the athleticism is off the charts. I think having Danielle Hunter in that room is going to be a massive, massive advantage to him to kind of fill out the way that he needs to fill out, in the sense of just becoming a more complete pass rusher, having all the moves that he needs to have in his bag, because the athleticism is crazy, but the technical aspects still need a little bit of polishing, and I think Danielle Hunter will be a great asset for him. Amarius Mims is the 5th tackle off the board in this class, and he goes to the Bengals at 18. This is an effortless decision if you're the Bengals, in all honesty. I think more protection for Joe Burrow means remarkable accuracy and a really elite offense. I think pretty much bar none, there's almost no other way that can go. As long as you keep Joe Burrow clean, he's shown he is one of the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL, and I think he's going to take some polishing, Amarius Mims is, but the athletic ability is really bar none among these offensive tackles in this class. Just a remarkable ceiling on this kid. Jared Verse goes 19 to the Rams. They desperately needed an edge rusher, and they got a really, really good one. Definitely a very, very interesting guy who, athletic freak, ceiling is absolutely off the charts, huge energy guy in the locker room. So I think this is a great way to spend your first pick in however long. I felt like it's been, I think 2016 was the last time they picked. So Sean McVay this is his first round pick as the head coach of this team, which is a wild thought. But let's move on down. The Steelers take Troy Fautanu at 20, a very, very talented kid. I think this might be the best pick of the entire first round. They get a kid that was a fan of the Steelers growing up because of Troy Polamalu. They're both Samoan, and just a great, great pick here. I think this is a guy that is going to be, honestly, I think we'll look back in a couple of years and say this is one of the best offensive linemen in the entire in the entire NFL. I think he's just so athletic, so dynamic, and can do incredible things for the Steelers this year. Chop Robinson goes at 21 to the Dolphins. Honestly, I thought they were looking for a replacement for Christian Wilkins on the interior. I thought they were going to go Johnny Newton here, but they got a replacement for his energy. This is a guy that is going to bring so much great energy to the locker room, to the practice field, get everyone going for the day, and definitely be a really, really good player for them. Another guy that's kind of a wild card defensive player of the year prospect, where he could explode and go for 12 sacks in a rookie year and do just remarkable things next year, just because that athletic ability is off the charts. At 22, we had Quinyon Mitchell to the Eagles. This is a fantastic value pick for them. Getting him this late in the first round was probably not what they expected, to be totally honest with you, but much needed help on the back end, and I think they got the best corner in the draft, to be totally honest with you. Also, a very, very funny tidbit from last night on the ABC broadcast was Saban basically admitting that they were tampering with Quinyon Mitchell. They wanted him to come over from Toledo, but he never entered the portal. That was a very, very interesting thing that I kind of hope we get a little bit more of from Nick Saban as he gets further into retirement, where he just kind of lets these old stories fly that he probably shouldn't. But it was a very interesting thing that gives you a peek into how college football works on a daily basis. But The fourth wide receiver off the board came in the way of Brian Thomas to the Jaguars at 23. Calvin Ridley obviously has found his way to the Titans, so that was a huge swing for them, and I think getting a big physical receiver for Trevor Lawrence is huge. You can throw those deep routes that Trevor Lawrence is so incredible at throwing, and then you have a guy where you don't have to put it right on target, and he's going to make a play. So I think this is a great fit. I think he might just be their top receiver this upcoming year in terms of touchdown catches and being that explosive player down the field. Dallas trades their 24th pick to the Lions for the 29th pick, and they take Terrion Arnold, the Lions do. This is a back end that is a Bama party at this point. They add him to Brian Branch, which was a fantastic pick a year ago, and I think this is a fantastic duo. These are two guys that are as smart or complete as you get when it comes to whether it's a nickel in Brian Branch's case or an outside corner in Terrion Arnold's case. Both these guys just play football the exact right way you'd want them to. Corner, they are as polished as they come, and if you're Terrion Arnold, having the ringing endorsement of Miss Terry never hurts anyone by any means. So very much like this kid, I think he's going to come in and work and be a great asset for them going forward. So the Lions continue to draft pretty much as well as anyone the last couple of years. And then somehow I nailed this one from the clouds. I got the first four in my mock draft, and then things kind of went a little bit haywire throughout the rest of it. But finally, I get one at number 25. Jordan Morgan is heading to Green Bay at 25. That was the 8th Pac-12 player picked up to that point, so a great last year for the Pac-12. Very sad to see it go, but I think this is a great pick for the Packers. It gives them, another young, talented kid that is going to develop into a remarkable player and gives you protection for the guy that is going to stir the drink over there with Jordan Love kind of coming into his own. Need as much protection as possible for him because the weapons have kind of worked themselves out, to be totally honest with you, over the last year or so. Graham Barton goes at 26 to the Buccaneers, so back-to-back O-lineman here. A very talented kid that can line up pretty much wherever you need him. There have been some people that have said center. There are some people that have said guard. I would lean more guard at the NFL level, but a very, very talented kid that is athletic as they come. Played lacrosse in high school and was just a elite lacrosse player, so it gives you an idea of just how athletic this kid can be. And I think this is a great pick for the Buccaneers, and he'll be around for quite some time around there, I think. The Cardinals did get Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, so they decided to go defense with 27. They got Darius Robinson, the edge rusher out of Mizzou, a very talented kid, one of the kids that I think some people were pointing to as possibly being left in the green room among the 13 that were there. He did not, and I'm very glad he didn't because that is always a situation you don't want to be in. He was actually the only person in this first round that had a raw athletic score below 8, but he was at 7.78. So just gives you an idea of how many elite athletes are in this class, especially in this first round. It's just remarkable how many crazy athletes there are. And then we get to the pick that I think everyone saw coming, but definitely was a little bit of a surprise that they traded up to do it, but the Chiefs trade up with the Bills to grab Xavier Worthy at 28. This just makes sense. It's Andy Reid saying, go get me the most speed you possibly can. They got the fastest guy in combine history, so I think it works out for everyone here. I think Xavier Worthy is going to be a great piece for them. Finally, you have I think full replacement for Tyreek Hill. I think you've had a number of really talented guys that have come through and helped kind of bridge that gap, but I think this is the kid that actually, fully takes those reins and becomes the player that Tyreek Hill was for them for so many years. But then let's get to the Cowboys. They take Tyler Guyton at 29 after trading down with the Lions, and there's a replacement for Tyron Smith. Honestly, you might move him inside. You might keep him at left tackle and move Tyler Smith inside to left guard. So tons of different things that can happen with this kid. A very athletic kid, played tight end and H-back at TCU before transferring to Oklahoma his final couple of years in college and moving to offensive tackle. Very athletic, can do a ton of different things. Needs a little bit of polishing for sure, but can definitely be a long-time tackle at the NFL level. And then we get to the last couple of picks here, and at 30, the Ravens snagged Nate Wiggins from Clemson. I think he definitely needs to fill out a little bit more in terms of being a more physical player, meeting guys at the line, playing press coverage a little bit better. But I think the ceiling is incredibly high. He also does have this little bit of a worry that it kind of formed throughout his college career where he doesn't have that, goldfish mentality where you can let one play behind you and just keep moving forward. He did struggle a little bit with that, but if he can figure that out, he can be a fantastic player at the next level. And then the big surprise came. We had the 49ers take Ricky Pearsall at 31. Not what I was expecting at all, especially with A.D. Mitchell on the board. But at the end of the day, I think this is a pick that could definitely really help them out. The Brandon Ayuk situation is still a little bit in flux there, so not really sure what this means for that. But if I was them, I would have taken Ladd McConkey here, but at the end of the day, Ricky Pearsall has elite athleticism, and when you put a guy in Kyle Shanahan's offense, he tends to look pretty good. So, but then finally, we had another wide receiver go at 32, but the Panthers traded back up into the first round with the Bills. They just swapped 32 and 33 picks, so the Bills will be the first team on the board today, but they pick up Xavier Legette from South Carolina, just an outright athlete. He can do so many different things on the football field, will be a huge help to Bryce Young. You just have to make sure that Bryce Young has the protection to find this guy because there's going to be a lot of deep routes. There's going to be a lot of stuff that takes a little bit longer to develop, and as long as you can give Bryce Young that protection, he can put it on him. So very excited for that duo. I think it helps out that team that has been building out that wide receiver group a little bit throughout the offseason, but this feels like the guy that they're planning on being their guy for quite some time going forward. They got Deontay Johnson as well, which helps, but let's get to some overall thoughts on the entire draft. First of all, 9 offensive linemen taken in the first round, 7 wide receivers taken, so just a remarkable class from both of those positions, and there's still guys on the board. You look at Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell still on the board. It's just remarkable the amount of guys at the wide receiver position that can be very successful at the next level. We had 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks, I believe the first time in NFL history. 23 offensive players in the first round, another record. I expect it to continue a little bit into tomorrow with some of the wide receivers still on the board, but it'll flip pretty quickly to the defensive side of the ball. My 2 favorite picks of the first round are Terrion Arnold to the Lions and Tali Fuaga. I think both those guys are just going to be remarkable players at the next level. I think Tali Fuaga is a guy that can be just remarkable for... Oh, wait, what did I mean Tali Fuaga? I meant Troy Fautanu. I apologize. I was a little... got my wires crossed there, but I lean more in the Fautanu direction just because of his athleticism. You can put him all over the offensive line, and he can be very effective. So I would go Fautanu over Fuaga, although Fuaga is a fantastic pick as well by the Saints. But my least favorite picks of the day, Michael Penix to the Falcons is comfortably the worst pick of the first round to me. I think it was mostly a throwaway, but I'd love to be wrong about that as a Falcons fan, but I did not love that pick at all. And then I think Ricky Pearsall at 31 to the 49ers, a very talented kid. I just thought there were 3 or 4 wide receivers on the board that were a little bit better than him. So those are the 2 picks that are a little bit head-scratching to me, but definitely could work out in the long run. But the college teams that actually won the day, they had LSU had 3 guys drafted, the 3-headed monster they had on that offensive side of the ball, and Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas. Bama had 3 players, J.C. Latham, Dallas Turner, Terrion Arnold, all really talented kids that could be huge players at the next level. Washington got their 3 guys after a remarkable season, all offensive guys, which should not be surprising at all. Michael Penix, Rome Odunze, and Troy Fautanu going in the first round. And then we had a pair of teams that had 2 players. Texas had 2 players in Byron Murphy and Xavier Worthy, and I think some people were expecting A.D. Mitchell to sneak in there as well, but I would have a sneaking suspicion he will be the first guy off the board today. But then Penn State had 2 as well, and Olu Fashanu and Chop Robinson. So very, very talented groups from all those teams. Definitely a little bit of a recruiting pitch help to those teams, but this is a really talented group of players. I think there is more athleticism in this group of players than I've seen in quite some time. I think the raw athletic score for this entire draft or this entire round was higher than any other first round I think of all time. So just remarkable athleticism in this group and in the rest of the class. Some of the guys still on the board: A.D. Mitchell, Lad McConkey, we talked about. Cooper DeJean is still on the board. Johnny Newton, a very talented interior defensive lineman. Kool-Aid McKinstry. So tons of talent still on the board to be had. Some guys that maybe you expected to go in the first round right there that fell out, but teams will be very, very happy to get them in the second round. So today will be very fun as well. Tons of defensive guys will start coming off the board very quickly after those first few wide receivers jump. But plenty of talent, plenty of guys to watch. And one of the very interesting things to watch is it seems like the Cowboys are looking in the running back direction and probably will take Jonathan Brooks at 56. If that were to happen, it would be the latest a first running back has been taken in the history of the NFL draft. So would be an interesting thing to watch. We'll see if he falls below 54 or ends up, not having to be on the wrong side of that history. But we'll keep you updated as everything happens. Definitely give you another update on Monday with who I think kind of won the draft overall and my overall takeaways. But we're going to take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the group of five. They seem to have a little bit of a succession plan for the future of their sport. Derek Dooley, the old Tennessee football coach, is going to kind of back this and has kind of been the biggest proponent of this, but we will break down all of that and what it kind of means for college football right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the face shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the first round of the NFL draft, gave you some of my takeaways, who kind of won the night, who did not so much win the night, but let's get into some group of five talk. There has been a ton of turmoil around the group of five, a ton of hands being forced in terms of the college football playoff deal, and it sounds like they're starting to kind of fight back a little bit. Derek Dooley, the former Tennessee head coach, is leading kind of a charge around the group of five to make a group of five playoff. That would be would be financially backed by private equity. I think this is a very, very interesting concept. It's something that obviously started when that college football playoff agreement was signed, and the group of five was forced to split 9% of the entire revenue budget for the college football playoff. Definitely did not make them very happy, and I think put them in a situation where they said, if we're not going to be really in this conversation in the first place, we might as well break off and try to find a new way to, a new postseason to be a part of. So it'll be really interesting to see what kind of happens with this. I think one of the really interesting things when we talked about, the pot that was being split between all of these teams was we knew there was a huge gap between the Big Ten and the SEC and everyone else. But the gap between the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Group of Five is miles. And it's so much that there's almost no chance for the Group of Five to be able to be fully successful given what they, given the position they are in going into this new agreement. So I think there's so many different things at play here. I think the Group of Five is kind of backed into a corner in some ways, but if they're able to pull this off, I think it would be a great thing for them. You have so many people talking about the SEC and the Big Ten and the Super League and all of these different things, but it only pertains to the top dogs, right? We only really talk about the guys that stir the drink around college football, but at the end of the day, group of five teams are as important as the SEC and the Big Ten teams. They mean the most to college football, and giving them a bigger platform in the postseason, I don't think is necessarily too much of a bad thing. Now, you don't love the idea of these two entities being separated because that's obviously not the way that we want college football to work, but it's one of those things that you are well past the point where these guys are going to be separated by a pretty hefty margin. There's very little reality where we can act like the Power Five and the Group of Five are playing the same sport, even, or playing on the same level, or playing with the same rules. So I think there is a desire, obviously, to keep the Group of Five in the conversation and with the Power Five and have them play conference or cross-conference matchups and be more involved with each other. But at a certain point, if you're the Group of Five, you do have to look at it and say, we want to be playing games in December that matter. We want to be on national television, even if it has to work around some of the bigger dogs in the sport. We want to be on national television playing for a championship, which is essentially what they're trying to do here. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. I mean, obviously, there is very little argument that the Big Ten and the SEC should be dominating these conversations. The leagues have combined for 29 of 40 of the playoff bids in the past 10 years. That's based off the new configuration of the sport, to be fair, but definitely they have dominated quite a bit. 113 of 184 BCS and CFP slots, so about 62%, have been the SEC and the Big Ten since its debuted in 1998. So definitely a lot of power on that side of the position, and I think the Group of Five is kind of coming to terms with that. They're looking around and saying, we don't really have a seat at this table. Now, we get to hang out and we get to, give our 2 cents every now and then, but no one's really listening to us at this table, so why not just go create our own over here? Now, this is very much easier said than done, obviously. You have tons of ongoing media deals with CBS, Fox, ESPN, all of those different entities that you got to get on board to be a part of this new thing, because it would add, TV money, it would add TV time to all of these networks. So the Group of Five has quite a bit of work to do to get there, but I think there's a ton of different things that they can do and a ton of different ways that they can kind of go after this. I think one of the ways, obviously, private equity has been involved in this. It's not exactly sure what those firms would be and how that would kind of come about, but it would be a huge help to them to at least have a little bit of money in their back pocket while they go about these discussions, because that has been, what works in these discussions, right? When you come to the table with the biggest check, you're swinging the biggest stick. I think it obviously helps a ton. I think if you're able to come to CBS or you're able to come to ESPN or Fox or whoever and say, not only can we give you good football, not only can we work around the big dogs and play maybe our playoff games on a Thursday or whatever it is, but we can also do that with the backing that is necessary to make this work for not only 1 year but multiple years, and continue to build this out to a place where hopefully you can finally have a sustainable model in that form. So this is one of the things that I've been in a really big advocate for quite some time, to be totally honest with you. There has been this really long push for the Group of Five to always be in on the conversation. And it's not necessarily that I don't want them in on the conversation. I would absolutely love for the entirety of college football to be level playing field, and we see tons of different teams pop up every single year in the national title talk, but that's not the reality of this sport. There is a very clear division between, the Georgias of the world and the Troys of the world. There is a very, very big difference between Bama and App State, and it's not that either of those teams, Troy and App State, are not remarkable programs. It just means they're playing different games. You're recruiting different guys, you're getting different coaches, you're getting different resources, and then forcing, Troy to try to compete with Georgia and Alabama on a weekly basis is not something that is sustainable by any means for these teams. So, in my eyes, when you look at the 12-team playoff and you look at Group of Five is going to get a team in, they are guaranteed at least one. But let's be honest, they're guaranteed one and no more than one. I don't think there's any reality unless you have two undefeated Group of Five teams and some Power Five teams struggle. I don't think there's very much reality where the Group of Five is finding their way to get more than one team in. And I would say very confidently that if that one team finds their way in, they're going to get railroaded on a road game in Athens, Georgia, or in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or in Columbus, Ohio, wherever it is. They are going to be put through the ringer pretty much every single year. And now there may be some years where the Group of Five breaks through and makes some crazy play and beats a Power Five team at home, and that would be an incredible story. Don't get me wrong, but it also would happen maybe one out of 15 to 20 times, and that might be being generous. I think there's a lot of division between these two entities, and I think having a different playoff for the Group of Five is not necessarily the worst idea in the world. You see things like the NIT, which is not necessarily the same type of thing, but there is that idea that, when you can't play in the big dance, when you can't play in the one that gets you the real, quote-unquote, real national title, you might as well make your own party and at least have a postseason where these kids can play football, can be around their teammates, and can show off themselves on a bigger stage to NFL scouts, because that's a huge part of this equation, especially for Group of Five players. So I think it's a very, very interesting thing. It's a very interesting concept, and I think it's something that a lot of Group of Five teams will really fall in love with. There's so many teams out there that are looking at this new proposal for a 12-team playoff and saying, yeah, we now have a guaranteed spot. We now have a seat at the table no matter what, and that's great and all. But first of all, what does that mean if every time that you get in, you are the 12 seed heading to the best non-conference champion, and you're playing them at their home every single year? Also, what does that mean in 5 years when they rediscuss, or in 2 years really, when they rediscuss this college football playoff and they look at the Group of Five and say, you haven't won any games, why are we giving you any more leeway here? So in my eyes, I think this is a kind of, you have to take what you're given if you're the Group of Five, and that's kind of what happened in the college football playoff discussions. But now you have the ability to kind of take a little bit of the power back, have the ability to operate under your own entity and be your own sport in a certain sense, at least in that postseason. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to do away with the regular season matchups between Power Five and Group of Five teams. I think it can just, give the Group of Five a chance to possibly play those games and put themselves on that pedestal, knowing that there's a playoff waiting for them, and they can prove that they are the best team in the Group of Five, even if the record is 9-3 or 8-4, because they played Oklahoma and Nebraska and whoever. I think having the ability to then say, well, we're going to play those tough teams, be battle tested, and then walk into this playoff and roll because we're used to those environments, we're used to those aggressive places, and it won't be an issue. So I think it could make for some very, very interesting discussions. I think the Group of Five deserve just more of a pedestal in this sport, and I think the postseason has slowly created less of a pedestal for them. We saw Cincinnati break through, and that was an incredible thing, and then they got railroaded by Alabama. But I think this just gives Group of Five teams and Group of Five players more ability to just showcase what they're about and showcase how good of a product that they can play, but not have to do it against the teams that it's just physically impossible for them to overpower and for them to win the line of scrimmage and do the things that they have to do to win. So I love this idea. I think it's something that could bring Group of Five actually more to the center stage than they are right now. I think it gives them ability to have standalone games where you can tune in and see App State and Troy, or App State and JMU, or whoever it is, battling it out and giving all the effort in the world, and not just, in the Pinstripe Bowl, playing a game that, half the guys from the Power 5 have already opted out, and it's just not nearly as fun for anyone. So I'm all for intense football as much as possible, and I think this would give us more of that. So very excited about this idea. I think it definitely will gain traction over the next little bit, but we'll keep you updated as that kind of unfolds and Derek Dooley kind of hopefully gets a couple more people on his side. But we're going to take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the college football playoff. There is a couple of new details that came out from a meeting this week that I want to break down for you all, so stick with us, and we will be right back with that.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about Derek Dooley's new plan for a possible Group of 5 playoff, and how that is a very interesting idea that I am all for, but we will break that down as it kind of unfolds a little bit more. But let's get to some new details around the college football playoff. We had a new meeting for the college football playoff committee yesterday, and we had some very, very interesting details that came out of it. Shihan Jerahaja, excuse me, I apologize, gave some kind of the biggest takeaways from this meeting in a great piece that he did over at CBS, and I wanted to break it down for you all. So one of the things that had kind of been over their head for quite some time has been the Army-Navy game and how to kind of deal with that because of the scheduling conflict that it does arise with the new games that are being put into place throughout college football, and in this playoff in particular. I think Army-Navy was an issue that we were a little bit worried about, but we'll get to that in a little bit. One of the things that I took away from this article was the Pac-12's placement in this is going to be changing very, very quickly. Teresa Gould, the new Pac-12 commissioner that was just promoted recently, was there at the meeting. It looks like they have a seat until 2025. Starting in 2026, they will not. It sounds like it will be reduced down to 10 instead of 11 seats on that table. So Teresa Gould will lose her position at that table, which is not great news for the Pac-12, and will mean they will probably have to work fairly quickly to kind of build out that conference as quickly as possible. It sounds like another thing that was thought of for quite some time but has now been confirmed is the Pac-12 teams are not eligible in any way for the auto bids for the first 2 years of the expanded playoff. Instead, they will compete as FBS independents. Now, the curiosity of that, I suppose, is this doesn't kick in until 2026, and I wonder if that means if the Pac-12 were to build out before 2026, could that be amended? I don't know, but we'll definitely keep track of that as it happens. The Pac-12 also will lose a representative spot on the playoff committee. Pat Chun, a fantastic athletic director at Washington State for quite some time, is making his way to Washington. So the Big Ten already has Ward Manuel from Michigan over there as their representative, so they don't need another representative. He will be taken off, and then the 13th slot will go to an at-large member, so not exactly sure where that will come from. Maybe it'll come from the Pac-12, but I would expect it will probably come from one of the other big conferences, or maybe a Group of 5 team possibly. But let's get to the Army-Navy issue. This was something that had been talked about a little bit, but definitely something that had slipped my mind a little bit early on, but I'd realized what are you going to do with the Army-Navy game? It's always a week after the conference title game, so a little bit later into December, and the playoff games, I believe, start the week after that. So the question is, how do we possibly incorporate these teams? Sounds like they're not going to. It sounds like they reached out to Army and Navy to see if they wanted to reschedule the game, move it a week forward onto Conference Championship week. They were not willing to do that, so they will not be in on the conversation. You will never see Army and Navy in the playoff. Now, I would be a little bit surprised if you ever were going to see Army and Navy in the playoff in the first place, but this just makes it, finalized. Maybe if one of these teams turns a corner in the next couple of years, they'll start to rethink that decision and maybe move around that game a little bit. But I do love that game being a standalone game on its own weekend, so not necessarily upset by this decision at all. I don't think it'll affect the playoff too much by any means. But one of the most interesting things that happened in this discussion was they did kind of a mock selection for what the playoff could look like. They did take some liberties. This is a little bit all over the place, I won't lie to you. They have Utah winning the Big 12 in this scenario, so some different things in here that I want to break down, but definitely a very interesting thing because there has been so much talk about what's going on in the next year and kind of how this is going to shake out in year one. And this just kind of gives you an idea of how it could shake out. So Clemson, they have obviously winning the ACC, Utah winning the Big 12. Those would be the four conference champions up top that would get those buys. And then you would have 5 through 8 would get their game at home. So TCU would be playing Tulane and Fort Worth. Ohio State and Penn State would be playing in Columbus, a very familiar place for Penn State. Bama would play USC and Tuscaloosa, and Tennessee would play Kansas State and Knoxville. So a lot of very interesting games here, some games that would be very, very exciting to watch. I think this upcoming year, if you got Tennessee and Kansas State in a 9-8 game, that would be incredible to watch, to be totally honest with you. But I think there would be a ton of really, really cool things to come from this. I think this is obviously taking a ton of liberties about how this kind of shakes out, but to give you an idea of why it could shake out this way and why some of these matchups are the way that they are and look a little bit wonky is some of these bowls have direct tie-ins with these conferences, and that just can't really be changed. That's just kind of the way that things go, and they will at least until 2025. So the Big Ten is guaranteed a spot in the Rose Bowl in the quarterfinals, so you have to set it up to where that happens. The ACC championship has to be slotted into the Orange Bowl, SEC or Big Ten into the Sugar Bowl. So there has to be certain affiliations within the bowl games. So some of these, rankings just have to happen. Some of these configurations just have to happen. Ohio State playing Penn State so that you would at least have the chance to, or you at least have one Big Ten team in that Rose Bowl against Clemson, hypothetically, is very necessary. So at least for the next couple of years. After that, there's no real plan for what would happen going forward. I hope that this is not something that continues to happen because obviously you don't want anything but the best 12 teams being ranked to affect matchups, right? You don't want, someone having to drop a spot and play someone a little bit tougher because they have to play in the Sugar Bowl. So I think that's something that likely will be done away with here pretty soon, but you never know. I think it's something that the bowl games have really loved in the past, but feels like we're kind of in a bygone era of automatically putting a conference into a bowl, but we'll see what happens with that. One of the big things that happened here was there was no real policy on rematches or conference matchups in the early rounds of the playoff. Obviously, you have Ohio State, Penn State here in the 6 and 11, so it feels like that's an inevitability, right? Hopefully, it doesn't necessarily happen in the first round, but I've always been a proponent of if it makes sense, if that's the way that the bracket lines up, these guys could play 4 times in a row for all I care. I think as long as you are not, tipping the scales one direction to make sure that this team doesn't play this team, and you're making sure that you're preserving some of the conference matchups. I think it's just not a great way to go about making playoff matchups, just because then you set up a situation where a team moves down or a team moves up and plays someone a little bit easier. A team moves down and plays someone a little bit harder, and it just creates too many problems. So I think the way that they should do it is these are the 12 best teams. These are the matchups that we're going to get because those are the most fair matchups, I guess is the best way to put that. But there's going to be plenty more to be ironed out. Those are very few tidbits that came out of that meeting that will definitely be much, much more as we come down the road, because there's tons to be figured out with this thing, and we will definitely keep you updated as it comes. But let's take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal. Had some big-time commitments over the last couple of days, and had some big-time names jump into the portal, so definitely want to break down everything for you guys, but we'll do that right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a little bit of new news around the college football playoff and how that could be looking in 2024. But now let's get to the transfer portal and let's talk about all the different things that have happened over the week. One of the biggest things that has happened is Jaden Rashada has committed to UGA. This is something that we have expected for quite some time since he really entered the portal, but now it is official. This is kind of a Dante Moore type situation where you have a very talented kid, you've started a little bit, been thrown into the fire, did not necessarily go the way that you had planned. Now you have the ability to learn from one of the smartest, one of the most consistent quarterbacks in the entire country, and hit the ground running once you get onto the field. So I think it's a great decision for his future. I think it gives him the ability to reach the heights that he is very much capable of doing, and I think it doesn't hurt by any means that he gets to go against his old team in Florida. That was a very precarious situation, if you remember that at all. But I think this does make UGA's quarterback room one of, if not the best quarterback room in the entire country. Between Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton, Jaden Rashada, Ryan Puglisi, the talent in this room is just off the charts, especially throwing the ball. I think all those guys are just remarkable. And then Jaden Rashada against Gunnar Stockton in 2025 for that starting job is going to be incredible to watch. We watched the Georgia spring game this past year, or a couple of weeks ago here, and it was just elite level football. I think we will see a lot more of that next year with Gunnar Stockton and Jaden Rashada, because both those guys will have a ton of claim to that number one position. It'll be very interesting to see who wins out there. Keandre Lambert-Smith, one of the guys that we have been watching at the wide receiver position for quite some time, has committed to Auburn. He took a visit to there, went to A&M, was flirting with taking a visit to Florida State, but never ended up going. Hugh Freeze just continues to build out these weapons for Peyton Thorne, and that is the most important thing. You have to give this guy as many pieces to throw to, as many guys that can get open, because he obviously is not necessarily the elite quarterback that is going to make things happen on his own and do incredible things outside of the pocket. But if you can put him in good situations and get a massive amount of studs around him, it obviously helps a lot. I think Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson are going to be great when they get on campus, especially Cam Coleman, because he was an early enrollee, gives him a little bit more time. But having a veteran voice in that room is hugely important, especially with two kids that are that talented. Having a guy that has been through the fire, has been the number one guy on a team, I think it means a ton for their development. So a huge pickup not only on the football field, but I think in the locker room for those kids in particular, I think will be great. I would not be surprised if this was Peyton Thorne's most common target. I don't know that this is going to be their leading receiver, because I think Cam Coleman is going to make a ton of big-time plays, but I think if you need a third down conversion, if you need a guy to just go to and on the underneath route or whatever, I think Keandre Lambert-Smith is going to be that guy for Peyton Thorne. So really like this pickup. I think it's a great fit for both parties. Another wide receiver that came off the board was Justice Ross Simmons, a guy that is committed to Syracuse now. He's coming over from Colorado State, and Fran Brown has done just an incredible job since taking over Syracuse. I feel like every single day he has made progress into being the program that he wants to be up there in Syracuse, and I think he's taking remarkable strides. You need a pickup in this offense. They badly needed a wide receiver one. They officially got one for Kyle McCord, a guy that he can go to pretty consistently and at least feel very good about him. Now, you got to get him up to speed a little bit quicker than you would normally if you were to come over in the winter portal, but at the end of the day, plenty of talent on this kid. As long as you can get him up and running, he should be a starter and possibly the wide receiver one for this upcoming year. Syracuse is a team that I think will surprise some people. I think you'll look up in about week 5 or week 6 and wonder how this team is undefeated. Well, the schedule is rather easy, to be totally honest with you. If Georgia was playing that schedule, people would lose their minds. But Syracuse will definitely have some games that they're going to be up against it. But this is a very interesting team that is pretty much as dangerous as they come in the ACC, to be totally honest with you. Marcus Bryant is another one, an offensive tackle from SMU that is committed to Missouri. A huge pickup for Missouri. I think one of the more underrated pickups of this portal group. I think this guy was a all ACC or AAC, selection a year ago. Very, very talented. Very likely to be the right tackle starter across from Caden Green, who was the transfer from Oklahoma. I think Missouri's path to winning is always going to be keeping Brady Cook clean. He's a very talented kid that can execute an offense as well as pretty much anyone in the country, but you got to keep him upright. As long as you keep him upright and you give him chances to get the ball to Luther Burden and Mookie Cooper and Theo Weiss, you'll be more than fine. There's no two ways about that. And Missouri just continues to impress me. Eli Drinkwitz continues to press the right buttons in the portal, not overstretch for guys, but get the guys when he absolutely needs them. And he's doing just remarkable things with that roster construction. So very, very good time to be a Missouri Tiger fan for sure. But let's break down some new names in the portal, and let's break down just kind of where the portal sits right now, because there is so much going on. The quarterback position is kind of unchanged. We had Jaden Rashada come off the board, obviously, but really there's not a ton of outright starting talent out there right now, and there doesn't really need to be because there's not a lot of starting jobs to be had right now around college football. So that's one really interesting thing. I think one of the biggest places that we see a ton of new names is the offensive line. James Brockermeyer is leaving Bama. He was running with the ones for the majority of the spring, it seems, at center, but I guess Parker Brailsford has won the job somehow and has become the center. He does have a no contact tag on him, which essentially just means teams are not allowed to reach out to him. He is only allowed to reach out to teams, and people think that means he's probably heading over to TCU to join his younger brother Tommy, which would make a lot of sense. But would be a great pickup for whoever gets him. I think this is a kid that was just kind of waiting for his chance and will definitely be a starter, especially if he goes to TCU at that center position. So very excited for that. Another center that has found his way into the portal is Bryce Foster, a very, very talented kid that was a 3-year starter for Texas A&M the last couple of years. Not really sure what the situation was here. We had I think 3 different guys at A&M were just off the roster pretty suddenly, so not really sure what happened in that situation, but we'll find out, and we'll definitely get more intel on that. But at the end of the day, this is a very, very talented kid that if you need a center, which Bama might at this point, even though Parker Brailsford is there, this is a guy that you absolutely want to get your hands on. There will be tons of teams that will be after him, needing that interior defensive or offensive line help, and I think he will be very highly touted. Now, can't go in conference to an SEC team, so we'll have to look elsewhere, but plenty of teams will be on this kid very, very quickly. One of the surprises was Tyler Barron finding his way back into the portal. This guy apparently just really likes being in the portal. He left Tennessee in the winter, committed to Ole Miss, decommitted to Ole Miss, and committed to Louisville, and now he's back in the portal. So he was at Louisville for a total of probably 2.5 months, went through spring camp, and just I guess it wasn't the right fit, or I don't really know what happened, but a very interesting situation there. I think he is visiting Miami pretty soon here, so I would lean towards them to grab him up. He would be a great piece next to Ruben Bain, would definitely help out that back end, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. The Canes are also in on Simeon Barrow Jr., the Michigan State defensive tackle transfer that actually we'll get to here right now, because By Job is another defensive lineman from Michigan State that has found his way out of the program. That is now 3 big-time players on that defensive front that they very much needed in 2024 to be successful. They had Simeon Barrow Jr., who we just talked about. Derek Harmon's another guy that is getting a ton of interest. I think USC might be the leader in the clubhouse there for the time being, but By Job is a very, very talented kid, very athletic, can do a ton of really good things. If he's put in the right situation, he can definitely thrive for sure. And then finally, let's get to a little bit of transfer portal intel on some of the guys that are still in the portal. Damian Martinez to Miami just looks like an inevitability at this point. I'm definitely on commitment watch for him. Expect him to be a Hurricane by the time, maybe by this time tomorrow, to be totally honest with you. Penny Boone, I expect to be in Lexington. I think everything is pointing that direction. He has not made an official call yet, but everything is pointing towards Kentucky getting him, and that would be a fantastic pickup. I think it could take a good offense to a possibly elite offense. Obviously, that rides a lot on Brock Vandegrift's ability, but I don't really doubt that quite as much as some other people might. But Dylan Edwards is another huge name here. The running back group is really deep, honestly, in this portal class, but Dylan Edwards might be one of the biggest guys on the market. It looks like KSU and Ole Miss are the teams to really watch in this one. Now, Nebraska, Georgia, A&M, UCLA have reached out, among others. I think Kansas was also in on him, so tons of people are reaching out to this kid because this kid is just remarkably talented, can do incredible things on the football field. I would lean KSU just because of his relationship with Avery Johnson, but we'll find out what happens. I think Ole Miss has been able to pull off some pretty incredible things in the portal over the last couple of years, so would not be surprised if he ended up in Oxford, but I would lean towards KSU as of right now. But yesterday was a very, very nice day in the portal for UGA. We talked about Jaden Rashada committing to them. Christian Miller had some rumors that he was heading into the portal and possibly following Bear Alexander to USC, but he came out and said he is committed to UGA. He is staying in Athens, much like Bear Alexander had to do with USC. So a much-needed thing for UGA. They absolutely need as much defensive interior talent as possible, and Christian Miller is a guy that I think could make a huge jump forward for them this year. We had Jason Zandamela, a very talented interior offensive lineman that is leaving USC after only I think he was only there for the spring, is still a freshman, so has plenty of eligibility left. He is in Gainesville, and the Gators got to make sure this kid does not leave campus. I think he is someone that if you have DJ Lagway, if you have a good offensive lineman to build around the rest of this offensive line, this year can be a struggle, and you can still feel really good about the future of your program. So I think there's a huge recruitment for them. If they can beat out UCF, which feels like the other team that is really vying for his services, that would be a huge pickup for the Gators and would definitely give them the ability to at least feel a little bit better about their offensive line, not only this year, but going forward. And then another defensive tackle that is a huge name on the board right now, Dominic Williams, the transfer from TCU. Apparently, it looks like Texas is the leader in the clubhouse fairly comfortably right now, but there are plenty other visits to come. We have LSU, Missouri. I think Oregon might get a visit here. LSU is the one I think to watch here in terms of teams that can really knock off Texas. When Bo Davis gets in front of you and can give you that recruiting pitch, it might be a little bit tough to pass up. So we'll be watching that one very, very closely. I expect Texas to win out, but this one might take a little bit longer and might get a little bit more complicated before it ends. And then finally, Elijah Herring, the leading tackler for Tennessee a year ago, very talented kid, would totally transform a defense the second he gets on campus. He is heading to Kansas State for a visit after going to Colorado about a week ago, I think. And would be a remarkable pickup for either team. Obviously, Colorado needs tons of defensive help, but Kansas State, I think this is a player that could take this defense to the next level, could give them an anchor in the middle of that defense, and really give the ability of this team, just add that next gear that they need on that defensive side of the ball. And I think Dylan Edwards would do the exact same thing on the offensive side. So if KSU can bull in both those guys, I mean, that would be a huge coup for Chris Kleiman and that entire staff. But tons will continue to happen over the next couple of days. We're only about 4 days until this thing closes, so we could have a little bit of a flood of players. We could have this kind of trickle down and not be as big of a finish as some expect, but definitely a lot happening, and definitely tons that will go into this, and the portal will be all over the place in the next couple of days. Give me 2 seconds here. We got a little bit of a question. In terms of joining GSMC Sports Network, do you mean as a host or as a fan? It's very, very easy. But as a host, yeah, I mean, you could definitely reach out to some people around the company. I know we have a website that has a ton of contact information and things of that nature. So, yeah, I mean, if you're passionate about sports and you'd love to get involved, I'm sure there were people that would love to have you. So, definitely, if you want to go check that out, there's definitely some contact info on the website that could get you at least in the door. I'm so happy to help with that. No problem there. But that will do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, especially you, Brady Johnson. Really appreciate that comment. But thank you guys so much for listening. It means the world to me. Your support means a lot to all of us here. So please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, we invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram for all the content and updates you could possibly need. Okay, we'll work on that contact info, see if we can figure out some things. Maybe I'll put in a good word, and we'll see if we can figure that out for you. But thank you so much for listening again, and I will see you guys on Monday.
Let's go.